let's talk to Brett from Missouri. Brett says the New Testament is a good guide for morality. Brett, you're live on Talk Heathen. What's up?
Hello. I hope you're all doing well. I actually run a YouTube thing and a podcast myself, and I thought you guys were interesting, so figured I'd call you up. I'm at Brett Keene on YouTube if you're curious.
Okay, Brett.
Yes.
So what do you think? Why do you think the New Testament is a good guide to morality? Let's start there.
Well, there's on its face surface by itself, it is actually a good guide. I've even heard many atheists state that the philosophy that Jesus taught was exceptional and one could actually live a pretty good life based upon it. But I've also compared the theology and the morality based upon other religions as well as atheism. And I've come to the conclusion that atheism is a subjective morality. It's basically whatever feels good, nihilistic. Nothing really has any meaning and value. It's only what's acceptable in society or whatever nature evolved us to be kind of concept. Well, as you know, nature isn't very kind. There's a lot of things such as pedophilia, killing, destruction in nature and society. We've got you guys were just talking about the death penalty, right? One of the big reasons why Christians argue over it is because our system is broken. It's messed up. So we don't know if we should go along with the system that says it's okay to kill people when they can't even get their cases right or people are treated fairly in the process. You get what I'm saying?
Yes. And also Jesus is a victim of the death penalty. So I would think that most Christians would be against it.
Right.
But, obviously they don't all agree on that. So, yes. And Brett, before we continue, though, everything you've said so far is about atheism. I haven't heard anything about the New Testament. And also you've described atheist morality as nihilism. And I don't know if you've actually done, and I'm sorry, correct me if I'm wrong, Brett, but have you actually read the literature on secular philosophy? Because there are many philosophers that have...
I actually used to be a very, very popular social media former atheist until I came over to Christianity. I've only been doing Christianity and theism for about 5-6 years, but I spent the majority of my life doing the Aaron Raw, Matt Dillahunty, amazing anus kind of thing.
That's great.
Atheist, sorry about that.
I remember.
I appreciate that, but I'm asking about, because there's different forms of secular morality, right? Like if you look at Camus, if you look at Sartre, if you look at Nietzsche, I mean, all of these are just 20th century examples. Obviously, you got to fill out the majority of secular moral systems, right? But like, there's more than one kind of secular morality. And is it subjective? Well, it's not based on a universal moral principle all the time. Yeah. But like, to just come to the conclusion and say that it's all just nihilism, that's a red flag for me.
Right.
You understand?
Right. Well, wasn't Nietzsche a nihilist? He basically said, even though he believed that God did not exist, he even stated God's dead. He said, we have to have something to fill the void. In his writings, he said, if we don't have some kind of moral foundation, then there's going to be, it's going to be a cataclysm. Society can't hold itself. That's why a lot of our leaders say that if you don't have God and those objective concepts to go along with, then it's how do you make laws like that? Who's going to make the laws if it's just our human subjective behavior, animalistic instincts and ideas?
Okay, so again, we're talking about something. If you're talking about what Nietzsche wrote in Thus Spoke Zarathustra, which he's talking about the deconstruction of Christianity as the main social and moral function of society, he does say that there has to be something that comes afterwards, right? He's using Zarathustra is sort of the prophet that he uses to sort of represent this. And he says there's this coming of age where there's going to be, people who are looking for something outside of Christianity in order to fulfill that. And he has a lot of various ideas about what that might be, but like when you say he's for nihilism, I mean, again, it's like, he's describing like one potential system that he thinks is going to be, useful across all well, not useful necessarily. I mean, for usefulness, he's talking about the Ubermensch and stuff. That's where he's writing about that. But like nihilism is a descriptive part of his moral systems. Okay, so that's kind of the nuance I want to make here, because he's not saying this is a good thing and that this is like what we should all be following. He's saying that this is going to be the result of it if we don't develop, secular forms of morality, which other writers like later do. Which again, it's like this is a very complicated issue. There's like a lot of thought that's gone into this. So
what does this have to do with the New Testament either?
I'm also, it doesn't really have much to do. Like, okay, we can talk about the problems of secular morality all day, right? Absolutely. That doesn't mean the New Testament is suddenly the like greatest and best of all the morality systems out there, right?
Exactly. So, those are two totally different conversations to be had.
Well, when we started the conversation, if you'll remember, I said compared to the atheist position and other views that I've researched and studied, I believe that the New Testament has a more efficient moral system than what is set up. And I don't just say that based upon, obviously, just belief and faith. I base it on stats and what we've seen historically. Anytime that you've seen where non-believers were given power or political push, it always ended in entire civilizations being enslaved or killed, gun control where weapons were removed and people were left like sitting ducks in a barrel. So it never turned out good. Go ahead.
Okay.
I don't think that's the case, though.
America was one of the largest slave-owning organizations like in the world for a long time, right?
Obviously.
And we were, it's not like we are less, like, it's not like we're more Christian now, right? Like there are more people like statistically who identify, I'm not saying population wise, but per person, like not per person, sorry, I'm the opposite of per person. If you divide up the population of slave owning Americans and all Americans, there's like, we're more Christians than there are now. So like, I don't understand why you're saying it's the more, use the word efficient, which I think is interesting, but like, why on earth would we follow Christianity when it seems to lead to just as many problems as any other system? Like, I don't see how it's the best one.
And the New Testament,
and you make a good point.
Yeah,
the New Testament talks a lot about taking slaves in a way that it supports it. So
yeah, absolutely. It never, and there is not a single line in the Bible that says slavery is wrong, or that human ownership shouldn't happen.
They literally give you instructions on how to do it according to God's word.
Sure there is.
No, there's not.
Sure there is.
Absolutely not.
Even in the Old Testament, it says that if you kidnap people, then you'll get the capital punishment. You're not allowed to take a person as possession. The entire book of Exodus talks about a man who is sent by God to free over 400,000 slaves. And as far as
that doesn't mean that the institution of slavery is inherently bad. That happened because it was the occupation of Jewish people.
Right.
And by the way, which didn't happen. Right. That narrative is false. But also, if you look at Leviticus, which is what Sydney is referencing, that outlines the actual rules that you have to follow if you're going to own a slave.
Right.
Which again, it doesn't say don't own a slave. It says this is what you do when you own a slave.
These are the preferred ways in which you should own a slave, because you should, apparently.
Okay. So, you guys are making some good points, but as far as the New Testament goes, you guys would have to agree on this, that if you're doing unto others as you want it to be done unto yourself, and you're loving people and you're loving your neighbor and loving your enemy, you would not enslave them.
Unless the Bible gives you permission to enslave them, which it does.
Again, the epistles...
Slaves are not considered your neighbor in the Bible. That's not who they're talking about. They're talking about people who are your equals. They definitely had slaves that did not have the same rights and freedoms as everybody else. When they say love thy neighbor, they're talking about non-slaves. They're talking about people who are equal in your community. I do not think that counts for slaves.
Yes, in the epistles, Paul does not write, slave owners, free your slaves. He says, slaves, obey your masters. Okay? Jesus, like, if we're just saying, do unto others as you should do unto yourself is the best form of morality, okay, that's one thing. We could talk about that, but that's different from just saying the New Testament is consistent in that idea, because it's definitely not.
No, it is definitely not.
Well, let's take history, for example. You mentioned slavery in the United States of America. Now, if we really dwelled into this, how did people get freed from slavery anyway? It was the Christian community, the Christian citizens who actually fought. You can't find me one single atheist who actually fought against this.
You can't find a Christian that supported slavery?
Is that what you're trying to say?
You have Christians who actually stopped slavery.
We also have Christians who owned slaves. Like, you understand that it was like definitely okay by most Christians for a long time.
Yes. The American South, very Christian, very pro-slavery. Like, that as a whole, those things go hand in hand.
You do realize that there was a lot of Christians who were hung alongside blacks for actually.
Brett, you do realize there were Christians that were doing the hangings.
Yes.
Like you really are doing a chicken and egg thing here. Okay, here's the chicken. It's the Christian society, the Christian institutions that allowed it. We didn't even allow women to vote until the 1900s. Okay, and that's also because of Christians, by the way. And it's because it was secular forms of morality, humanism, that was influencing this stuff more than anything, right? Humanism did not always exist in society, but more as humanism began to develop, as secular forms of justice began to become widespread across the world, that's when we actually saw the social changes. It's not because people got to their senses and realized, oh, well, Christianity actually says this. I'm sure some of them justified their anti-slavery practices through Christianity. In fact, I know that for a fact because I've actually read about this subject. But if you also read about this subject, you will see document after document after document that outlines church sermons, that outlines people's public opinions at the time, that said, yes, absolutely, the owning of people is absolutely okayed by Christianity, 100%. Right. And they had no doubts about that. At least some of them definitely were okay with this.
Especially depending on the type of person.
Again, it was okay. So historically, Christians are actually the ones who broke the slavery, and that's the reason why people are free today. But there wasn't any atheism.
No. It was the Christians that went to fucking Africa. Oh, capitalists, but also Christians that went to fucking Africa and took those people over in the first place.
Right.
Okay. This was a mostly Christian society that were doing these things. Slavery was just as much of a legitimate practice in Christianity as anything else that the Bible prescribes, because there are no admonitions against slavery in the Bible. There is absolutely zero, none. No supporting scripture that says you shouldn't. You have to go the back way around and say, oh, well, the Bible says we should treat others like we should treat ourselves, right? And then you can get to that conclusion. But the actual institution of slavery is not prohibited in the Bible whatsoever.
In fact, it's actually supported in
it's not prohibited by atheism either.
Brett, I'm an atheist, and I'm telling you, it is wrong to own slaves.
Brett did not watch the cold open.
Brett, I'm sorry, Brett. I don't know who you did on what you did on social media or whatever.
Right.
But like, if you're going to be an influencer, you have to know the literature, right? You have to know the facts from just like the common narrative that gets spouted off by apologists and stuff. Because this is absolutely ahistorical in your understanding, and also just I don't know. I'm kind of flabbergasted that you take this position on this.
I don't think there's a way that you can seriously take this position.
Ranting right over me.
Yes, because you're saying many wrong things.
Yes, Brett.
And I want to make sure that our audience knows that they're wrong.
You don't even have enough moral framework to listen to another person's side of you.
First of all, Brett, I'm talking to you right now on the show. We're live on the air. Okay, I can just hang up anytime I want.
Brett,
Second, go ahead, Sydney. I'm letting Sydney talk now because anyway, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Brett, I have listened. I know who you are. I've listened to hours of your content. I've listened to so much of your content that I recognize what kind of conversation we are about to go into because I remember you and I've watched your content and I've listened to you ad nauseum. That's why I feel comfortable being like, ooh, this is not going to go well because I know exactly who you are and I've watched your content. I've watched your content since back in like 2013. I know exactly who you were when you called. I have listened to you so often that I don't even have to hear what you're about to say in order to know what you're about to say. Right? So it's not like we don't want to listen to you. It's that we have listened to you and we know what a time crunch and a time suck this conversation is going to be. Because I recognize that you're just going to disagree with us, even when you know for a fact you're misciting history, even when you know for a fact you're misquoting the Bible. You know this. You and I both know this about you, Brett. I remember. You and I both know that you just like to continue to say the opposite, even when you know for a fact that what you're saying is not true, because you like to hear yourself live on air and you like to get people riled up. But I remember you, Brett. So accuse me all you want of not letting you talk, but I have listened to you ad nauseum and I know how this conversation's going to go. And it's fine because you're going to leave here and you're still going to assume you won and you're probably going to make a video about how you won and you know, atheists won't let you talk or something like that. And that's fine. I hope it's monetized. But it's like, I know how this conversation is going to go because I've listened to you, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's cowardly to mute people like that and just rant right over them. You have no moral framework and you've got no place to be able to tell us who's right and wrong.
Brett, I'll tell you what's cowardly. It's not doing your fucking homework and telling us that you think you know what the fuck you're talking about, because you are talking out of your ass right now. Seriously. Why don't you go fuck yourself, actually? Hey, do unto others as you would do unto you. And I'm telling you to do unto yourself. Go fuck yourself. You understand? All right. We have conversations with all kinds of people on this show. You are not even the most divisive. You don't even come close.
No.
Okay. You're really not worth the effort. If you're going to seriously come here and pretend like you can lecture us about morality when you haven't even read the fucking books, when you don't even understand our position, and yet choose to frame it in your own narrative anyway. I mean,
and when you assume we don't know who you are.
Yeah.
If you're going to be an influencer, at least be expected for people to know who you are. You're a bad influencer if you assume you're a stranger to everybody.
I don't know who the fuck you are, but if you're an influencer, I feel sad for the folks that listen to you because you don't know what the fuck you're talking. You just don't. You don't know what you're talking about. There are lots of people who have identified secular moral frameworks. And again, not all of them are created equal. There are definitely some that work better than others, but there is a conversation there that you are missing out on, because everything I've heard so far is the exact same shit I've heard from Christian apologists who have also never actually read anything by any serious moral philosopher that has thought about this stuff and just think that Christianity is the only game in town. It's not even close. So anyway,